Lieutenant Commander Ja Kim was working late in the Space Monitoring Center when the alarms started ringing. Red lights flashed across the room as technicians rushed to their stations. On the main screen, 7 large objects had appeared near the moon. They moved in perfect formation, too fast and too purposeful to be asteroids. "Get me confirmation," Jia ordered, her voice steady despite the fear growing in her chest. She had trained for many things during her 10 years in the Korean Space Force, but not this. A young technician looked up from his screen. "They're ships, Commander. Definitely not ours." Within an hour, the President of Korea was on a video call with leaders from 20 other nations. Jia stood behind her admiral, listening as the world tried to make sense of what was happening. The aliens had not yet made contact, but their ships had taken positions around Earth, high above major cities. "We need to show them we're peaceful but not weak," someone said. Admiral Park, a tall man with gray hair and a stern face, turned to Jia after the meeting. "They've sent a message. They want to meet with a human representative." "Who will go?" Jia asked. The admiral looked at her for a long moment. "They're requesting a liaison," he said, his voice tight. "Someone expendable enough to risk but smart enough not to get us all killed." He paused. "I'm sending you, Kim." Jia felt her stomach drop, but she nodded. "Yes, sir." They gave her only 6 hours to prepare. Jia studied everything they knew about the ships, which wasn't much. She recorded messages for her parents and younger brother, just in case. A team of scientists gave her a small device to help translate any alien language. Politicians told her to be diplomatic but firm. "Remember, you represent all of humanity now," the president told her. The small shuttle that took Jia to the alien mothership felt tiny next to the massive black vessel. As she got closer, she could see that the alien ship's surface wasn't smooth, but covered with thousands of small patterns that seemed to move and shift. Bright blue light came from openings that looked like weapon ports. The shuttle docked with a soft bump. Jia took a deep breath, straightened her uniform, and stepped through the airlock. The inside of the alien ship was cold and smelled like metal and something sweet that Jia couldn't name. 2 creatures waited for her. They stood on 2 legs like humans but were much taller, nearly 3 meters high. Their bodies were thin, with skin so clear Jia could see dark shapes moving inside them. They had 4 arms each, and their faces had no nose, just 2 large black eyes, and a mouth full of small moving parts. "Follow," one said in perfect Korean, surprising Jia. She walked behind them through curved hallways where the walls glowed with soft light. They led her to a large round room where more aliens stood in a circle. In the center was one larger than the others, wearing what looked like armor made of shining metal. "I am General Dorn of the Terran Empire," the large alien said. Its voice sounded like rocks being crushed. "You speak for Earth." Jia swallowed hard. "I am Lieutenant Commander Ja Kim. I represent Earth in this first meeting between our peoples." General Dorn made a sound like water boiling. The other aliens clicked parts of their mouths. Jia realized they were laughing. "Your planet has no empire, no single ruler?" Dorn asked. "We have many nations that work together," Jia explained. Dorn moved one of his 4 arms, and a 3D image appeared in the air between them. It showed Earth's military bases, ships, and weapons. "Your weapons are primitive," Dorn rumbled. The image changed to show tanks, fighter jets, and missile systems. The aliens around him clicked their mouthparts loudly. "Projectiles. Chemical propellants. We outgrew such toys millennia ago." Jia felt her face grow hot with anger and shame, but she kept her expression calm. "Our weapons serve our needs." "Do they?" Dorn asked. He moved another arm, and the image changed to show a small island in the Pacific Ocean. "Watch carefully, human." A bright beam of light shot down from one of the Terran ships. On the screen, the island glowed white for a second, then simply disappeared. Where there had been green land surrounded by blue water, there was now only steam rising from the ocean. Jia couldn't hide her shock. That island was uninhabited, yes. We scanned it first, Dorn said. We are not barbarians, but you should understand what you face. Jia looked at the alien leader. What do you want from Earth? Your planet has resources we need. Your people will work to provide them. In return, we will not destroy your cities. That's not a fair exchange, Jia said, trying to keep her voice steady. Dorn moved closer to her. Jia could see organs pulsing inside his transparent body. Fairness is a luxury of equals. We are not equals. We would prefer to be allies, not subjects, Jia said. Your preference has been noted, Dorn replied coldly. You have 3 Earth days to prepare your leaders. We will begin establishing control centers in your major cities. Resistance will be met with demonstrations similar to what you just witnessed. The meeting was over. The same 2 aliens led Jia back to her shuttle. As she traveled back to Earth, she could see that the news had already spread. Even from space, she could see lights in cities going dark as people fled. At the emergency command center, Jia reported everything to a room full of grim-faced leaders. Their technology is far beyond ours, she concluded. Their weapons could destroy our cities in seconds. Admiral Park looked older than he had just hours ago. Options. We appear to comply, the defense minister said quietly, while secretly preparing to resist. The president nodded slowly. Lieutenant Commander Kim, you made contact with them. They seem to respect you, or at least tolerate you. Would you be willing to continue as our liaison? Jia thought about the clear-skinned aliens with their impossible weapons and their casual destruction of an entire island. She thought about her family, her friends, all of humanity now living under threat. Yes, she said. I'll do it. As the meeting ended, Jia looked out the window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, the Terek ships waited. They thought humans were weak because their guns were small. Jia allowed herself a small, determined smile. Throughout history, the overconfident had always underestimated the desperate. The aliens would learn that lesson soon enough. Jia woke up in her small room on the Terek flagship. 3 months had passed since the aliens took control of Earth. The room was cold, as always. The aliens liked cold places. She pulled her blanket tighter and stared at the ceiling. It glowed faintly blue, like everything on the ship. She was not officially a prisoner. The Terek called her a cultural exchange representative. But she could not leave the ship without permission. She could not enter many areas. Guards watched her always. Prisoner with a nice title. That's what she was. Jia got up and put on her uniform. The aliens had allowed her to keep wearing it, with a special Terek symbol added to show her status. She checked the small hidden pocket she had sewn inside her sleeve. The tiny recording device was still there, undetected by the aliens. A soft chime sounded at her door. That would be Mok, her assigned guide. Of all the Terek she had met, Mok seemed the most curious about humans. He was also lower in rank, which made him less careful about what he said. Good morning, Jia Kim, Mok said as the door slid open. Like all Terek, he was very tall with see-through skin. Jia had gotten used to seeing the dark shapes of organs moving inside him. Today we will visit the secondary propulsion control center. Thank you, Mok, Jia said with a small bow. She had learned that the Terek appreciated shows of respect. I look forward to learning more about your amazing technology. As they walked through the ship's wide hallways, Jia noticed more activity than usual. Is something happening today? She asked. Yes, Mok replied. It is the day of consecration. All weapons will be blessed by the priests. Jia tried to look only mildly interested. Consecration. Is that a religious practice? Mok's skin rippled, which Jia had learned was a sign of pride. Indeed. The Terek have followed the way of the eternal flame for 10,000 years. Our weapons are not merely tools. They are extensions of the flame's will. This was valuable information. Jia had noticed how carefully the Terek handled their weapons, but she hadn't understood it was religious. That sounds very meaningful, she said. On Earth, some cultures have similar beliefs. They passed a large set of doors with guards standing on either side. Unlike the other doors on the ship, these were made of a red metal and had symbols carved into them. "What's in there?" Ja asked casually. "That is the main armory for this section," Mock explained. "All hand weapons are stored there when not in use." Jia nodded as if this was just mildly interesting. "So your soldiers don't keep their weapons with them?" Mock's mouthparts clicked in what sounded like shock. "Of course not. The sacred arms must remain consecrated. Only during duty periods or battle may they be removed from the armories." "I see," Jia said. "So all weapons stay in centralized armories?" "Of course. The Eternal Flame would be displeased if we treated our instruments of justice as common tools," Mock replied, showing unusual openness. "Even General Dorn must return his ceremonial blaster to the High Armory after official functions." This was exactly the kind of information Ja needed. The Terek's religious beliefs had created a strategic weakness. If something happened to those armories, the Terek would be largely defenseless. Their tour continued to the propulsion center. Jia paid careful attention to everything, especially the power systems. The Terek used some kind of energy cells that glowed bright blue. The same technology powered their weapons. "What are those made of?" she asked, pointing to a power cell. "That is compressed quantum plasma," Mock said. "Very stable under normal conditions, but extremely powerful when activated correctly." Jia memorized everything. Later in her room, she would record it all and hide the data. That evening, Jia was allowed her weekly communication with Earth. These calls were monitored, but over the past months, she had developed a code. She spoke about her family and friends, using specific words and phrases that carried hidden meanings to the resistance leaders. "Please tell my brother Jun that his blue project is very interesting to me," she said, which meant the Terek weapons used blue energy cells. "And let my friend Dal know that I'm thinking about her church work," which conveyed information about the religious storage of weapons. The resistance on Earth was growing stronger but still hidden. Humans pretended to accept Terek rule while secretly preparing to fight back. Small groups tested Terek weaknesses and shared information. The aliens' confidence was their biggest blind spot. They thought humans were too primitive to be a real threat. One day, Mock took Jia to observe a weapon consecration ceremony. They stood in a balcony above a large room. Below, hundreds of Terek energy weapons were laid out on long tables. Priests in special armor moved among them, placing their hands on each weapon and chanting. "What are they doing?" Jia whispered. "They are connecting each weapon to the Eternal Flame," Mock explained. "The energy cells are synchronized to respond only to Terek commands." Jia noticed something interesting. During the ceremony, the weapons glowed brighter, almost pulsing in time with the chants. There was some kind of resonance happening. "How beautiful," she said. "The weapons seem alive." "In a way they are," Mock said. "The energy responds to the ceremony. That is why we must be careful. If the resonance frequencies become unbalanced, the energy can become unstable." This was the most valuable information yet. Jia kept her face calm while her mind raced with possibilities. If the energy cells could be destabilized by certain frequencies. That night, after checking that her room wasn't being monitored, Jia carefully recorded everything she had learned. The Terek had 3 critical weaknesses: centralized weapon storage, religious handling protocols, and energy cells that could be affected by specific frequencies. Weeks passed. Jia continued gathering information while building trust with Mock and other Terek. She was allowed to visit more areas of the ship and even attended official functions with General Dorn. All the while, she watched and learned. During one of her calls to Earth, she heard news that made her heart beat faster. Hidden in casual conversation was the message that resistance scientists had developed a device that could disrupt Terek energy systems. They needed more information about the exact frequencies that would affect the weapon cells. Jia knew she had to get that information. Her chance came during another ceremony. when Mach explained more about the sacred harmonies that kept the weapons stable. Using her hidden device, she recorded the sounds of the chants and the responding hum of the weapons. The opposite tones are forbidden, Mach told her. They would anger the eternal flame. What would happen? Jia asked. Energy would become chaos, Mach said simply. That is why only priests may tune the sacred harmonies. Jia understood. The resistance now had everything they needed. The next time she communicated with Earth, she used her most careful code to share what she had learned. The humans had a plan now. The Terek's worship of their weapons had revealed the path to defeating them. As she looked out the viewport at Earth below, Jia allowed herself a small smile. The aliens thought humans were primitive because they used simple guns. They would soon learn that sometimes simpler was better. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon was a clever mind. Jia's shuttle landed at the old mining facility in the mountains. The Terek allowed her these visits to Earth once a month as part of her cultural exchange duties. What they didn't know was that she never actually visited her family. Instead, she met with the resistance. She stepped out of the shuttle into the cold mountain air. 2 guards walked with her to the main building, then stopped at the door. "We will wait here, Lays and Kim," one said. "You have 3 hours." Jia nodded and entered the building. As soon as the door closed behind her, she was led through a hidden door in the floor. A narrow tunnel took her to a large cave filled with equipment and people working at various stations. "Welcome back," said Jin, the resistance leader for the Asian sector. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "Your information has been extremely valuable." "Did the frequency recordings help?" Jia asked. "More than you can imagine. Let me introduce you to our team." He led her to a table where 3 people were working with strange-looking equipment. "This is Han, our physicist, Su, our chemist, and Tae, former Special Forces." Han was a tall man with glasses and quick movements. Su was shorter with careful hands that never seemed to stop moving. Tae looked ordinary, which Jia knew was perfect for someone who needed to blend in during operations. "Your recordings changed everything," Han said excitedly. "We finally understand how their weapons work." He pulled up a holographic display showing the inner workings of a Terek energy weapon. "Their weapons use unstable quantum compounds," Han explained. "These compounds are normally kept stable by specific frequency patterns, what they call their sacred harmonies." "Can we disrupt them?" Jia asked. Han smiled. "If we could create a resonance cascade." He pointed to a pattern on the display. The right counter frequency would cause the energy cells to destabilize. Not just one weapon, but any weapon nearby with the same frequency pattern. "Like a chain reaction," Jia said, understanding immediately. "Exactly," Su added. "We've been working on a device." She carefully lifted a small object from a protected case. It looked like a simple data crystal, the kind Terek used to store information. But this one had tiny modifications visible only if you looked very carefully. "It's essentially a frequency emitter," Su explained. "Primitive by their standards, which is why they won't detect it. But when activated near their power cells, it will trigger the cascade," Han finished. "The weapons will destabilize and release their energy." "You mean explode," Ta said bluntly. He had been quiet until now. "Let's not dance around it. This device will turn their precious armory into a bomb." Jia picked up the crystal carefully. How powerful would the explosion be? "Based on what we know about their energy storage," Han said, "a single armory explosion could disable an entire Terek ship. And if we placed these in multiple armories at the same time?" Jia asked. The 3 resistance members looked at each other. "That would cripple their entire fleet," Ta said quietly. Jia thought about the plan forming in her mind. "I can place one in the main armory on the flagship. There's a weapon consecration ceremony in 2 weeks. Security will be focused on the ceremony itself, not on checking gifts or offerings." "Can you plant it without being caught?" Tai asked. "Yes, I've earned some trust with the Terek, especially with Mach, my guide. He might even help me unknowingly. They spent the next hour going over details. The device needed a remote activation signal. Once placed, Ja would need to be far from the armory when it was triggered. We'll coordinate with resistance cells worldwide, Jin explained. Similar devices will be placed in Terek ground armories on the same day. As they finished their planning, a resistance fighter ran into the room. We've been compromised. The Terek just destroyed our bases in Seoul and Tokyo. Everyone froze. Jin quickly accessed the communication system. How did they find them? New scanning technology, the fighter said. They're detecting our communication patterns. Other bases are being searched right now. Jin turned to Ja with a grim expression. Our timetable just changed. We need to act now, before they find this base too. The ceremony is still 2 weeks away, Jia protested. We can't wait that long, Ta said firmly. Every day we delay means more bases discovered, more people killed. Jia thought quickly. There's a smaller ceremony tomorrow. A blessing of new weapons brought from their home world. I could place the device then. Is it ready? Jin asked Han and Sue. Sue nodded. It's ready. But we only have this one prototype. The others won't be ready for days. One might be enough if placed correctly, Han said, especially in the main flagship armory. Jia took a deep breath. I'll do it tomorrow then. But I'll need a good reason to be at the blessing ceremony. I'm not usually invited to those. I have an idea, Ta said. He explained his plan quickly. It was risky but might work. That could get you killed, Jin warned Jia. We're all taking risks, she replied. This might be our only chance. They spent the rest of Jia's visit finalizing details. Sue taught her how to handle the device safely. Han explained exactly where to place it for maximum effect. Ta drilled her on what to do if she was caught. Too soon, it was time for Jia to return to the shuttle. Jin walked with her to the tunnel entrance. Are you sure about this? He asked quietly. Jia touched the small crystal hidden in her pocket. Yes, the Terek think we're primitive because we use simple weapons. Let's show them that sometimes simple is better. Be careful, Jin said. We need you alive for what comes after. After? Jia hadn't thought much beyond the plan itself. The Terek will still be out there, even with damaged ships. Someone will need to negotiate the peace, someone they already know. Jia nodded. Understanding her role went beyond just placing the device. I'll be careful. She climbed back through the tunnel and walked out of the building. The Terek guards were waiting exactly where she had left them. Did you enjoy your family visit? One asked. Yes, very much, Jia lied. I'm ready to return to the ship now. As the shuttle lifted off, Jia looked down at the mountains. Somewhere down there, the resistance was preparing for tomorrow. Other cells around the world would be alerted. Some would be ready, others might not. Either way, tomorrow would change everything. On the shuttle, Jia rehearsed what she would say to Mok when she returned. She needed his help to access the blessing ceremony, though he wouldn't know the real reason why. The small crystal felt heavy in her hidden pocket. Such a small thing to bring down an empire of giants with massive weapons. But that was the point, wasn't it? The Terek had laughed at humanity's small guns. They never considered that size wasn't everything. Sometimes the smallest tool could cause the biggest change. As the shuttle docked with the flagship, Jia straightened her uniform and prepared her face to show nothing of her plans. Tomorrow would bring either victory or disaster. There was no middle ground now. Jia stood outside General Dorn's chamber, holding the small box in her hands. The box was made of polished wood from Earth, carved with symbols that looked similar to Terek writing. Inside was the device, hidden inside a crystal sculpture. Her heart beat fast, but her face remained calm. The door opened. 2 Terek guards checked her with scanning devices, then let her enter. General Dorn sat on a large chair that looked like it was made of black metal. His clear skin showed his organs working harder as he saw her. Lieutenant Commander Kim, he said, his voice rumbling. This is unexpected. Jia bowed deeply. General Dorn, tomorrow is your blessing ceremony for the new weapons. I have come with a gift. Dorn's mouth parts moved in what Jia had learned was surprise. A gift? From humans? Yes, Jia said, stepping forward. In these 6 months of occupation, I have learned much about Terek ways. I understand now the importance of your weapons traditions. She opened the box carefully. Inside, the crystal sculpture caught the light, breaking it into blue and green patterns. It was shaped like a flame frozen in crystal, a token of Earth's respect for Terek military tradition. Jia said, presenting the decorative box to General Dorn. Our artists made this to honor the eternal flame. Dorn leaned forward, his 4 arms moving with interest. He did not touch the sculpture but studied it carefully. This is unexpected, he said again. Humans wish to show that we understand the sacred nature of your weapons, Jia continued. Her mouth felt dry, but she kept her voice steady. We hope this small offering might be accepted. What do you wish me to do with this? Dorn asked, sounding suspicious. Jia had prepared for this question. Place it in the central armory as an offering to the eternal flame, she suggested. Let it stand among your sacred weapons as a symbol of Earth's new understanding. Dorn was silent for a long moment. Jia's heart beat so loudly, she was sure that Terek could hear it. Everything depended on this moment. Finally, Dorn made a sound like stones rolling together. A Terek laugh. You have learned well, human. Your submission pleases me. He called to one of his guards. Take this to the high priest. Tell him to place it in the central armory near the flame shrine during tomorrow's ceremony. The guard took the box carefully. Jia bowed again, hiding her relief. Thank you, General. May I attend the ceremony tomorrow? I wish to learn more of your ways. You may observe from the upper gallery, Dorn said. Now leave me. Jia bowed once more and left quickly. As soon as she was alone in the corridor, she let out a long, quiet breath. The first part of the plan had worked. Now she needed to warn the resistance that the device would be placed earlier than expected. In her room, Jia sent a coded message during her scheduled communication time. She mentioned her excitement for tomorrow's special sunrise, which told the resistance to be ready 1 day early. That night, Jia couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, thinking of all that would happen tomorrow. If the plan failed, she would certainly be killed. If it succeeded, many Terek would die. The thought troubled her. Not all Terek were cruel. Mok had been kind to her in his way. Morning came. Jia dressed in her formal uniform and was escorted to the upper gallery above the central armory. The large room below was filled with rows of energy weapons, all glowing with blue light. Hundreds of Terek moved in formal patterns, preparing for the ceremony. Jia spotted her crystal sculpture. It had been placed on a small stand near what looked like an altar made of the same red metal as the armory doors. The high priest, wearing special armor covered in glowing symbols, stood before it. The ceremony began. The Terek chanted in their own language, a sound like water and stones and wind all mixed together. The weapons seemed to pulse with light in response to the chants. Jia watched as the high priest picked up her sculpture and placed it directly on the altar. Perfect, she thought. It couldn't be in a better position. Hours passed. The ceremony was long and complex. Finally, as the ship moved into Earth's night shadow, orbiting over the Pacific Ocean, the Terek filed out of the armory. Only guard remained inside. Jia returned to her room, her hands shaking slightly. Now came the hardest part. She took out a small device hidden in the lining of her boot. It looked like a simple communication tool, but it had been modified by the resistance. She waited until the ship's systems showed most Terek were in their rest chambers. Then she pressed the activation sequence and sent the signal. The crystal in the armory would now be emitting the counter frequency that Han had designed. For several minutes, nothing happened. Jia began to worry that the device had failed. Then a small alarm sounded in the distance. Then another, louder. Suddenly, the floor beneath her shook slightly. The first explosion was small. Just one weapon overloading. The guard in the armory probably thought it was a minor malfunction. The second explosion was larger. 2 or 3 weapons going off at once as the frequency spread to their energy cells. By the third explosion, alarms blared throughout the ship. The floor shook harder. Emergency lights came on in Joe's room, bathing everything in red. Chain reactions spread through connected systems as each weapon's power cell destabilized the next. The explosions were getting bigger as more powerful weapons joined the cascade. The ship's internal communication system came on, with voices speaking urgent Terra commands. Jia looked out her small viewport. In the distance, she could see flashes of light coming from other Terran ships. The Resistance had succeeded in placing devices in multiple locations. Simultaneously, Resistance fighters worldwide had deployed similar devices at ground armories. A huge explosion rocked the flagship. Jia was thrown against the wall. The lights went out completely. Emergency systems activated, creating dim blue lighting. The air system made a strange noise, then stopped. A moment later, it started again, but weaker. Through her viewport, Jia watched as the night sky lit up. Terran ships erupted in brilliant flashes. Some seemed to be trying to move away from Earth, but their engines were failing. Others were completely dark, drifting without power. The door to Jia's room slid open. Mok stood there, his clear skin showing organs working frantically. "What is happening?" he asked. "All weapons are failing." Jia tried to look confused and frightened. "I don't know. Is it an attack?" Another explosion shook the ship. This one was close enough that Jia heard the metal tearing. Warning sounds came from every direction. "The sacred harmonies are disrupted," Mok said, his voice shaking. "The eternal flame burns out of control." He grabbed Jia's arm with one of his 4 hands. "Come, we must get to the escape pods. The ship is dying." As Mok pulled her through corridors filled with panicking Terran, Jia saw the results of her plan. Walls were torn open. Fires burned where energy cells had exploded. Injured Terran called for help. She felt sick at the destruction, but reminded herself of what the Terran had done to Earth. Sometimes survival required terrible choices. Through a damaged section of hull, Jia could see Earth below. Lights were going out across Terran bases as the plan worked worldwide. For the first time in 6 months, humanity was fighting back. And winning. The escape pod landed roughly in a field somewhere in Asia. Jia stumbled out, bruised but alive. Around her, other pods had landed, carrying Terran survivors from the flagship. In the sky, she could see the damaged alien ships, some drifting without power, others attempting emergency repairs. 3 days passed as Earth's militaries rounded up stranded Terran and secured their technologies. Jia worked as a translator, helping both sides understand each other. The Terran, without their weapons, were surprisingly cooperative. Most seemed shocked that humans had defeated them. On the 4th day, Jia received an urgent message. General Dorn had survived and was asking to speak with her. She was taken to a secure facility that had once been a Terran command base. The building was damaged, with walls cracked and ceilings fallen in. Power came from human generators, not alien technology. 2 guards led her to what had been the command center. Equipment lay broken across the floor. In the center sat General Dorn on a makeshift chair. His once imposing figure looked smaller now. His clear skin showed damaged organs, and one of his 4 arms was missing entirely. "Leave us," he told the guards. They looked at Jia, who nodded. Once they were alone, Dorn stared at her with his large black eyes. "It was you," he said simply. "The crystal sculpture." Jia stood straight and met his gaze. "Yes. Clever," Dorn said. His voice was weaker than before, but still rumbled. "Using our own beliefs against us." "We used what we had," Jia replied. Dorn gestured to the destruction around them. "Your resistance had other devices ready. All our ships, all our bases, all attacked at once." He paused, breathing with difficulty. "You could have destroyed us completely," he said weakly. mandibles clicking softly. "That wasn't our goal," Gia replied. "Humans don't seek domination, just freedom." "Freedom." Dorn repeated the word as if testing it. "Our scans showed your weapons were primitive. We thought you were primitive." "Technology isn't everything," Gia said. "Size of weapon doesn't determine who wins." The general was quiet for a long moment. "I have been authorized to discuss terms. The Terek High Council has been informed of our situation." Gia understood what he wasn't saying. The Terek leadership on their home world now knew humans were dangerous. The occupation force had failed. "What terms do you offer?" she asked. "We will withdraw from Earth," Dorn said. "In exchange, we request the return of our people and permission to repair our ships." Gia had expected threats or tricks, not a simple offer to leave. "That's all." "For now," Dorn said. "But I believe there is another possibility." Over the next weeks, as Terek survivors were gathered and their ships slowly repaired, Gia met frequently with Dorn and other Terek leaders who had survived. The conversations were difficult at first. Both sides were suspicious, but slowly understanding grew. The Terek were not evil, Gia realized. They were simply used to taking what they needed from worlds with less advanced civilizations. They had never faced a species that could defeat them with simpler technology. One day, Mach visited Gia at her temporary office. His injuries had healed faster than Dorn's. "General Dorn has asked me to serve as interim ambassador," he told her. "He believes I understand humans better than most Terek." "I think that's a good choice," Gia said, smiling slightly. "You were always curious about us." "Curiosity saved my life," Mach replied. "I was in your section of the ship, far from the Armory, when the explosions began." They worked together for days, drafting what would become the Earth-Terek Cooperation Treaty. It was not just a peace agreement. It proposed something new, an exchange of knowledge and technology that would benefit both species. "Your people created a frequency device using simple components that defeated our most advanced weapons," Mach said during one session. "Imagine what we could create together." The Terek High Council was reluctant at first. They wanted to simply leave Earth and never return. But Dorn, despite his injuries, spoke strongly for cooperation. Earth had resources the Terek needed. The humans had proven themselves worthy of respect. Finally, 1 month after the attack on the Terek fleet, representatives from Earth's nations gathered with the remaining Terek leaders. The treaty would be signed. The ceremony took place in a large room with windows that looked out over a city. Cameras broadcast the event worldwide. Gia stood beside Mach, who now wore special robes marking him as the official Terek ambassador. His skin had healed, showing healthy organs moving within. Dorn watched from a chair nearby. He would return to the Terek homeworld soon for better medical treatment, but he had insisted on being present for the signing. "Today marks a new beginning," said the United Nations Secretary General. "Not conquest, not surrender, but true cooperation between different peoples." Mach stepped forward to sign the document. "We misunderstood your species," he admitted to the assembly. "Size of weapon does not equal intelligence of wielder. The Terek have learned this lesson at great cost." Gia signed next, representing Earth's united resistance. As she placed the pen on paper, she remembered the small crystal device that had changed everything. Such a simple thing to bring down mighty warships. "We have much to learn from each other," Gia replied, looking up at Mach. Around them, human and Terek engineers were already talking excitedly about new projects. The Terek would share their knowledge of space travel and energy systems. Humans would contribute their adaptability and creative thinking. That evening, Gia stood alone on a balcony looking at the stars. A month ago, those stars had brought threat and fear. Alien ships had hung in the sky like dark promises of destruction. Now, as the first joint human-Terek spacecraft began construction, the stars held new meaning. Mach joined her on the balcony, his tall form casting a long shadow. "Your people will visit our world someday soon," he said. "And your people will visit ours as guests, not conquerors," Jia replied. "All because you showed us that sometimes smaller is better," Mock said. "A lesson my people needed to learn." Jia smiled as she looked back at the stars. They no longer seemed threatening but full of promise. The Terek had scoffed at humanity's small guns. Their mistake had cost them an easy conquest, but gained them something more valuable. A worthy ally with different strengths, but equal intelligence. Together, they would go far. The end.